Rio with the cross.
Ah, yes! And it's the man who missed the penalty who scores the winner. What a story! And Chong Huan.
You're listening to the K-League United podcast, proud partner of Football Nation Radio.
Hello, and Ashmika. Welcome to the K-League United podcast with me, Paul Neat, and Matthew Binns.
Hello, Paul.
How are you doing, Matthew?
Not too bad, Paul. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad. Just got back from Sokcho, so I'm as pink as the shirt that I'm wearing. I didn't take any sun cream. I do it every single time I go anywhere. I think next time I must take sun cream, and I haven't, and now I'm pink, like the Korea shirt from, well, this year and years gone past.
Yeah, yeah. It's got kind of a pink tinge to the current one. The one that you seem to be sporting, though, is far more suitable for what we might be talking about today.
Yes, well, that's because 20 years ago today, i.e. May 31st, was when the 2002 World Cup in Korea and Japan got underway. Of course, it began with that opening ceremony, as well as France losing 1-0 to Senegal at Seoul World Cup Stadium. But I thought, seeing as though we have to wait until November for the actual World Cup this year, let's go back to 2002, much simpler times, obviously, for all of us, and also relive, basically, Korea's run all the way through to the semis. And what we're going to do is we're going to release an episode on the very same day as the games, but just 20 years later.
Yes, so, for example, Korea's first game was against Poland on June the 4th, then they played USA on June the 10th, and they played Portugal on June the 14th, so we'll be releasing episodes on those same dates.
Right, exactly, and we will have some special guests to help us, not just going to be us, two English blokes that weren't even in Korea in 2002. We're going to have our very own Jung Muyol bringing us up to speed with how it all was at the time, you know, like what the media might have been saying, or how the feeling was amongst the fans and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll have him. We will have some other guests. Some we haven't confirmed exactly just yet, so we can't say. But stay tuned, and as we go through the run to the semis, we should have some interesting guests for you. But all right, so let's cast our minds back actually to 2002, May 2002, to be more specific. Binns, how old were you and what were you doing at the time?
I was 14 years old. I was at the end of high school, or middle school, as we'd say in Korea, obviously. It was the World Cup of early mornings for me, from what I remember. It was, granted, I should say, it's been perfectly normal for other countries for a long time to have World Cups in the morning, so I should really count myself lucky. But I think, definitely for me, I think it was the first that Europe was presented with having to set alarm clocks in the morning and it just start times at work. And that was my experience of it, at least. I remember England versus Argentina. That was the big one as an England fan. I remember Siemens concrete boots against Ronaldinho. And I remember England versus Nigeria. 0-0, I believe it was. It was being played on one of those TVs on a stand. You get wheeled in, and they wheeled one into the assembly hall, and they put all our lessons back because it was on a really early hour in the morning. So yeah, that was kind of my memory of it. I really enjoyed it, but I remember everything was over by 12.
Right. See, I wish I did remember, because I don't remember anything really, apart from two things. One of them was one that you just mentioned, England against Argentina. And I remember England losing to Brazil. And this is probably how lazy I am, or was, or probably am still, is that I think it was a 7:30 a.m. kickoff, I think, for the Brazil game, the quarterfinal. Wasn't it? Quarterfinal?
And then quarterfinal, yeah, definitely.
And I remember being sat in bed, barely able to keep my eyes open, and I'm struggling through the first half. I managed to get through it. And then at half time, I was like, I'll have a little nap at half time. And then I didn't wake up until the commentary went a bit mental. And it was when Seaman got lobbed. And I was like, oh, that's it, we're out. So I just turned it off. And that was my last memory of it. I don't think I even watched the final. I don't remember anything at all. But what I will say about South Korea and whatnot is it's Sports Direct in Preston. They had pretty much all the shirts from the World Cup, and I very nearly bought the Korea shirt. I liked it. I liked the color, and obviously the design was like a template with Nike, and they had, the Netherlands was the same one, the USA was the same, I think, maybe even Portugal. But I liked it, and I was like, I want to buy that, and I very, very, very nearly did, and I didn't, and I regret it. So I had to buy this one, which I don't think is real, to be honest. But it looks all right. But yeah, and that was the only thing that I remember, and it was only years and years later when I moved to Korea, and then on my very first day, I'm walking past Daejeon World Cup Stadium, and then my friend was like, "Oh, well, that's the stadium where Korea played Italy, blah blah blah, etc." So no spoilers. I won't say what happened with that one. We'll get to that in a few weeks' time, or a few episodes' time. But yeah, that was pretty much it, really, with the World Cup. But I was 16, just turned 16 after the opening ceremony. I was doing my GCSEs, so the last year of high school for me. I didn't even know what K-League was then in 2002. And of course, back then, if you look at K-League back then, only 10 teams.
Yeah, it was a pre-FC Seoul.
It was. Yes.
Yeah, Ulsan was still called Ulsan Hyundai Harangi, and it's still called that in some news outlets overseas. Who don't seem to notice that things have been updated. Songnam were still Ilha Chunna, and Jeju were not Jeju. They were based on the mainland. They were still called Bucheon SK. And then
I'm trying to think what kind of music was in the charts at the time, and what kind of films and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I've kind of been a method all weekend in preparation for this, Paul. I've only been listening to 2002 music. I've been to an Orne Bang singing room, belted out some of these hits just to get into the mindset for this series of podcasts. So yeah, in terms of music charts at the time, well, Vanessa Carlton was top of the Billboard charts, singing about what I can only assume was the USA's botched training regime and walking 1,000 miles to the World Cup. While in the UK, Liberty X were hoping England would give everyone a little bit more this time out.
There we go.
That was in addition to Ant and Dec's "We're on the Ball."
That was a good one.
It was selected as the country's song for the tournament. Mostly celebrating England's 5-1 victory over Germany in the qualifiers in typical England fan fashion, if you're really going to question the lyrics. So let me test you, Paul. Neville to Campbell.
Campbell to Rio.
Rio to Scholesy.
Scholesy, Gerrard.
Oh, God, I've forgotten now. Gerrard to Beckham. Gerrard to Beckham.
Ah. Beckham.
I'll give you a hint. It was another striker.
Owen.
The other one.
Heskey.
Beckham to Heskey and Heskey to Owen. It's a goal, 5-1. Yes, that was.
Yay.
That was what England.
I remember because in the song they do this Scholesy, Gerrard in the video. Yeah. They kind of do that.
They do indeed.
Great song.
In Korea, meanwhile, there was plucky young upstart Psy. He was hoping his song Champion from his album earlier in the year. He was hoping that song Champion would double up as an anthem for the World Cup. It's a catchy tune, mind, but let's see where he is in 10 years' time after this World Cup. In terms of music out at the time, Rain had released his debut album Bad Guy, and it had been kicking up a bit of a fuss in May, and it was bringing some competition to what was the year's biggest album at the time, which was Boa's second studio album, Number One. A little bit confusing title there, which was still at number one by the time this tournament came around. A single, though, of the same name had been knocked off the top spot, though, by Country Cuckoo, hoping for everyone to conga and maybe to get into the World Cup spirit, I assume.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, cinemas, well, it was the year of Spider-Man and Star Wars Episode 2. They jeweled it out in May in overseas box office, but a bigger film was on the horizon to take take the box office by storm, and that was the live adaptation of Scooby-Doo. Yeah, that was going to make some waves. But yeah, it was the web slinger Spider-Man. He was staying top of the moviegoers must-see list here on the peninsula.
Wow. Well, there you go. I don't remember any of those. I don't remember Scooby-Doo.
You've not missed much in that time.
No. See, what about Star Wars Episode 2? Because the first one, I enjoyed the first one, to be honest. Episode 1. Yeah. Is that wrong? I don't know.
No, Episode 2. Yeah, there's a lot of politics in Episode 1.
Really?
Yeah, I remember watching it.
Right.
It's not held up well, but Episode 2.
Speaking of politics,
Mm-hmm.
this brings me on to. I wanted to talk about some background as to how Korea and Japan got the nod to win the World Cup bid.
Mm-hmm.
So they were actually selected, according to this, on the 31st of May 1996. So the tournament kicked off exactly 6 years later to the very, very day.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, according to my extensive research, and by that I mean things that I found on Wikipedia, initially, South Korea, Japan, and Mexico presented 3 rival bids. And basically, there's a lot of aggressive PR, and they got told to calm down a bit, skip forward a bit, and then South Korea and Japan were basically faced with the choice of having no World Cup at all or a shared World Cup. And then they had to then say, well, okay, let's do it together. It's like when you argue with your little brother, either you share or no one gets it. You know what I mean? It's like, that happened to me anyway. So that's what it was. And then South Korea and Japan were unanimously chosen as the hosts for the World Cup. And here we are.
Yeah. First to be held in Asia, first to be held outside of the Americas or Europe, and first to be jointly hosted by more than one nation, I believe.
Yes, there were some debuts as well. China, Ecuador, Senegal, and Slovenia. And it was also the very last World Cup to use the golden goal rule. And actually, I was looking again on Wikipedia, and it says that 3 of the 4 World Cup golden goals, 3 of them were scored at this World Cup. And of course, one, rather infamously, was involving South Korea. We'll get to that. We'll get to that much later in this mini series. But yeah, that's what I want to know, though. In terms of like the hosting and who decided it all, I might have to ask me all this when we catch up with him. But how did they decide which country was going to host the final and the opening match? Surely there must have been some disagreements about that, you know?
Yeah, I think that is certainly one for Muyol, actually, because I'm not quite brushed up.
Yeah.
On that. But yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because there can only be one team that holds the final, and
only one team hosts the opening ceremony, which was Korea, held in Seoul just before the France versus Senegal game. But maybe I'm being a bit stupid here, but aren't the hosts usually in Group A, and don't they normally play the opening game in a World Cup, or is that just?
Yeah, you're right there. That's usually they're usually up there, aren't they? In the first couple of matches, and Korea, Japan were held back. I wonder whether that was politically, again, a political decision.
Maybe, yeah.
Neither team kicks off on opening day, perhaps. But yeah, it's
so maybe that's why they chose France, because they were the holders.
Yeah. If you were Japan or Korea, would you want to host the final? This sounds a bit strange because, of course, your immediate reaction is yes, you'd want to host the final because I guess that's kind of the whole point of the World Cup. But you also at the same time,
yeah, I would.
Are you expecting your teams to go to the final now? Again,
no.
We're talking about Korea's run, but when you were making those bids, are you expecting either of those teams to have made it to the final? And you're thinking, well,
No, surely not. I don't know. I think you just want it for the prestige, wouldn't you? Just to sort of, this stadium hosted a World Cup final.
Yeah, you could say the same about any other words. It's a bit of a silly argument for me, really, thinking about it. But yeah, you just say the same about any World Cup, really. Most teams just want it for the prestige and things. But yeah, it's one for Muyol. It's one I'm not going to speculate on until we can have it more. With some more expert knowledge.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, well, let's just obviously touch on the venues as well. 10 each in Korea and Japan, Now, I will list the name. I'm not going to tell you the actual capacity because it'll take me forever. But in order of capacity, it was Daegu, because Daegu is the biggest. Daegu Stadium, or it was changed to Daegu Stadium, originally called Daegu World Cup Stadium. That's the biggest. Seoul, of course, slightly smaller, 5,000 seats fewer than that one. Then Busan, but that was the ASEAN Stadium, which, of course, wasn't actually purposely built for this World Cup. It's for the Asian Games. Then Incheon Munhak Stadium was the other one. Ulsan, the Munsu, Suwon, Gwangju, Jeonju, Jeju, and Daejeon. Now, again, these are some questions that I'm going to have to ask Muyo. And I've tried to find this information, but I'm not a very good Googler or neighborer, if you will. I want to know, and if anybody's listening to this and you know this, then please do let us know. Why did they choose those cities? Like, obviously, Seoul makes sense. Some of them are other ones as well. Daejeon, central city, quite a big city. Busan, second biggest city in Korea. Jeonju, though, and Gwangju. Suwon's too close to Seoul, no? And Incheon. I don't know. Why did they choose those places in particular? Because it's like, if you were to build a World Cup stadium here now from scratch, or choose them, Jeonju makes sense because it's the home of the biggest club in Korea, right? Oh, of course, yeah. Let's build one in Jeonju. But back then, 2002, Jeonbuk hadn't even won the K-League title yet.
Yeah, I think you've got two things to factor in here. I think one, how they're building 10 stadiums each. That's a ridiculous amount. That's a lot of stadiums. That's both countries going at it there, just trying to show who can do the most. But you've got the league at that point was far smaller than it was. We haven't got any citizen clubs in at this point. We see it a lot with a lot of World Cups in the past where they want to build the infrastructure to then push their domestic league. You think, looking at some of these, Incheon didn't have a team at the time. Daegu didn't have Daegu, building that stadium, they don't have a team at the time. Jeonbuk, they were playing in the Civil Stadium. They were only about 7 years into their lifespan at that point. Jeju didn't have a team at that point. They would take one from Bucheon. Daejeon didn't have a team at that point. No, they didn't.
We did.
Sorry. Yeah,
because
you did. Yes, 19.
We won the FA Cup the year before.
Yes, you did. Apologies, I take that back. But yes, and then
Daegu were founded in 2002, though, weren't they?
Yeah, and Gwangju, they had the military team. Was that in Gwangju at that point? I'm not looking at my notes here, but yeah, Gwangju didn't have a citizen team certainly. So it was more to kind of build. I'm assuming it was more to kind of build an infrastructure for the actual K League to then kick on and use the legacy of the World Cup to try and instill a bit of football fandom in the country, but more so than they already had. Because I mean, as well at the time, we'd already had the decentralization policy of Seoul, with teams being forced to move out of Seoul to Bucheon, to Anyang, to Songnam, and
there we go. Yeah,
it's part of that.
Well,
the joy.
In terms of where the games are played, groups A to D played in Korea, and then E to H were over in Japan. But I want to have a look at the squad. Okay, so the Korea squad, 23-man squad. Mm-hmm. Now, my first observation in this, right, because I looked obviously to see who won the league the year before, 2001, and that was Songnam.
Yeah.
And there's no Songnam player in the squad at all. And I looked, and none of the players had moved from Songnam to somewhere else afterwards. It wasn't as if, like, for example, Sol Ki-hyun had gone from Songnam to Anderlecht. It wasn't like that. I was like, that's incredible, isn't it? Imagine now if, like, Jeonbuk win the league, which they probably still will, and then you don't have any of their players in the Korean national team. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, you'd think so. And Gus Hiddink as well, he made some tough decisions as well ahead of that World Cup. He also famously dropped Lee Dong-guk as well, who had been showing a lot of promise in years. In his early years, he'd also been at the 1998 World Cup in France. He was dropped for this. And Gus Hiddink very much went with players that that formed a team that had that unity, but also to avoid any kind of External controversies, I'd probably say.
Yeah, very politically put there. Yeah, maybe. We don't. Yeah, again, question to Muyol as well. This is I'm making note of these as we go along.
Yeah.
I also wanted to look at some other players some players that missed out. Shin Tae-yong was at Songnam at the time. He won the MVP award in 2001.
Yeah.
Didn't go. In fact, there were 3 players from Songnam in the best 11 of that year. Didn't go to the World Cup. Then, if we look at the top scorers, the top Korean scorers from the 2001 season, Woo Sung-young scored 11 in 22. So Jung-won, Suwon Blue Wings legend, 11 in 25. Park Jong-hwan, 9 in 16. They didn't go. Nam Ki-il, 9 in 27. And he didn't go either. Now, I was going to say that he did, but I get confused between him and Kim Nam-il. Kim Nam-il definitely did go to the World Cup, but he didn't score that many goals.
I love the fact that confusion for followers of this podcast continues all the way back to 2002 now. But no, that is incredibly surprising given those goal scoring exploits. Given the fact that they're in the best 11 there, it's a very bold move by Gus Hiddink with this squad.
It was, yeah. Looking at the squad now. Like there are a lot of names that you obviously someone who's been following K-League since 2013. There are some very recognizable names, but there were some of them just obviously I had to look at them. I had to go and look at their Wikipedia pages and find out who they were. And if you scroll down to number 15, Lee Min-sung, he is the manager of Daejeon, but I don't think he played. We'll get to obviously, a look back on the tournament as a whole at the end. But Lee Min-sung, Cha Do-ri. Can you believe Cha Do-ri went to the World Cup and already he'd had 12 or 13 caps playing for Korea University. He wasn't even on the books of a club yet. He was still only 21. Incredible, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And I wanted to actually, looking back at that 2002 World Cup squad and comparing it to now, obviously now the squad that was announced for the friendlies against Brazil and whatnot is a 28-man squad. So it's obviously a lot larger, 5 players more. But there are 7 players playing abroad, 4 of those in Europe. Now, if you look back at 2002, there were 6 and only 2 in Europe. So I was wondering whether you could use that as a benchmark. It's like, well, is that the right combination of domestic players? And players that are playing in Europe, players that are playing overseas and whatnot. If you look at the 2018 squad, there were 10 playing abroad, and 4 of those were in Europe. A few of those won't be playing in this World Cup, obviously. Key was one of them, and Kuta Chol was another one as well. But yeah, I thought I want to go back, and I think as we go along through this series, I'll do a bit more digging and find out how many players are playing overseas and whatnot. But yeah, we'll see how this 2002 squad go anyway. See how they fare. So let's have a look back at the groups just very quickly. Right, Group A, France definitely winning that. Surely holders definitely winning that. They had Denmark, Senegal, Uruguay. Uruguay, they'll probably finish in second place. You'd think. Group B though. Spain. That's an easy group for Spain. Spain, Paraguay, South Africa, Slovenia. Same with Group C as well with Brazil, Turkey, Costa Rica, China.
Yeah, you can't say anything but 3 wins for Brazil there.
Yeah, and China, they didn't even score. Anyway, Group D. Now this is if you don't know what Korea do and how they fare, this is a tough group. South Korea, United States, Portugal, Poland. Yeah, that's a difficult group. That's probably the hardest group so far.
In terms of the teams that are in there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're obviously looking at it from the South Korean perspective. If you're South Korea, you're drawn with them.
You think it's difficult?
Yeah, it's not.
Even the United States and Portugal will be thinking, well, yeah, Portugal. They think, well, if we beat the United States, we're on here.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that wraps up the groups that are in Korea. Then we nip over to Japan, and then you got Germany, Republic of Ireland, Cameroon, Saudi Arabia. Yeah, that's
I don't see
Germany's
Germany in there.
Yeah. Group F though. What did you think about England's group?
I remember it all being about the Argentina game. I remember the group. Even at that point in my life, I think this was only the second World Cup I remember.
Yeah, same.
Because I was a bit too. 94 probably would have been, but England weren't in it.
Yeah.
And 98 was the first World Cup I remember, and then 2002. I remember England. I even knew already then that we never win our first game. Like Sweden, Sweden's one of those teams where you kind of think, and this is, all credit to Sweden here, but this is my memory of football at the time. You think Sweden mid-table club going to cause you a bit of bother. They're like a. I'm trying to think of an equivalent now. The current Premier League table. I haven't looked below Liverpool in a long time. Man United, mid-table club, and then you got Argentina.
Yeah, well,
Argentina was the one. Like Argentina's going to destroy it. They just Batistuta was all I remember. Everybody going on about Batistuta's going to destroy us.
Yeah, well played.
I remember that. Yeah, and Nigeria, I thought was going to be one of those tricky games. Well, I think as an England fan, I felt we'd get through, but it's going to be it's going to be tough.
I was scared of Argentina, especially after what happened in the '98 World Cup and what happened there.
Yeah, I was
scared of that.
And there was so much narrative building up over it.
Yeah.
Obviously, Beckham and his red card, Beckham and his redemption against Greece, Beckham and his metatarsal a month before the tournament. Yeah, that's when we learned about what the metatarsal was. That was point 2002. Never heard of a metatarsal.
No.
After 2002, everyone's been injured by a metatarsal injury at some point. That's it. 2002 was the birth of the metatarsal, as far as I'm concerned, as an England fan.
And did you know a Preston player had the quickest recovery from a metatarsal? David Nugent. He took just 6 weeks to return from metatarsal. There we go.
That is.
That's true.
That is a niche fact.
Clinging to the fact that's all we got to celebrate. But yeah, that is generally true. I think it was true. At least I believe it's true anyway, which is all that matters.
6 weeks recovery. You'll never sing that.
All right, Group G. Mexico, Italy, Croatia, Ecuador.
Yeah.
That Italy, you think, okay.
I do think, Croatia were always I'm mixing it with the Croatia of present, where it's Croatia, that's a very tough team. Croatia was still a good team back then, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I'm mixing it up slightly in my head 20 years.
But the thing is, though, Modric is probably playing back then.
He's been playing forever.
Yeah, he has. Yes.
Champions League as he won now. But yeah.
Well, one more now.
One more now, indeed.
And then in Group H, we had Japan, fellow hosts, obviously Belgium, Russia, Tunisia. That's not a bad group, actually. Belgium weren't the force they were. Belgium weren't the force they are now, is what I'm trying to say.
You'd have to say that Japan got the better group than Korea.
They did. Yeah, they did. They got the final and the better group. Something's not right there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's probably enough of us wittering on. We are going to go into more detail of the actual games with special guests, starting with Muyol. He'll be joining us for a look back at the Poland game. Of course, Korea got their 2002 World Cup underway on June the 4th, 2002 against Poland. And that game was down in Busan. Can you believe it? Of all the stadiums to pick, they picked that one. But yeah, so what we'll do, we'll have a look back, some of the key moments in the games. We'll ask Muyol some questions of things that we don't know, because we don't know anything really. And yeah, that'll be it.
So we'll see you down in Busan.
이것은 한국 축구의 실력이 아닙니다. 한국 축구는 세계